Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abi Ajayi. I look after Africa and the Middle East at the London Stock Exchange. And in very simple terms, it is my emotive responsibility to ensure that we see more African companies listed on the London Stock Exchange. Essentially, I think I'm driven to facilitating capital access for African companies, helping national champions become globally consequential companies. In very simple terms, I am pleased to be joined today by two very dear friends. And so if you've seen us, we were already chatting. But before we jump in, the lines between founders and investors seem to blur these days. Can you please raise your hand if you are a founder and investor at the same time? Founder and investor. Please raise your. I can see you're a founder and investor. I just want to count. Okay. If you are just a founder. Okay. So who are the spectators in the room then? Because I count the hands. Anyway, I'm going to start from the left side and I'll let Kristin sort of introduce herself and tell you what she's been up to. And I expect that we'll have an interactive conversation over the next sort of 40 minutes. Don't wait to ask the question. Just raise your hands. I would see you. Forget, these glasses see you really well. So I would see you. Just raise your hands and I would stop to speak to you. Kristin, please.
I think I got my own mic. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristin Wilson. And I like that I'm in the room with fellow founders and investors. So that's really good. So I guess wear two hats. I'm an early stage investor. I really love the value of death. I'm clearly a masochist. So I have been investing for the last now 11 years in companies, idea stage through to pre-seed stage. I do occasionally do the seed or Series A deal, but my sweet spot is that really early stage of the founder's journey. Most of my investments have been on the continent, but I've also done a few things in North and Central America, nothing in Europe yet, unfortunately. And then on the founder side, I founded a company, or one of the companies that I founded that I'm also actively involved in right now is called Spurt. And I lead sort of strategy for that company. And the work that we do at Spurt is really around sort of enabling growth, right? I love Abby's framing of saying, helping national champions become globally relevant. Our goal is really to stimulate that growth spurt in companies by helping them to leverage technology for innovation. And so we have a range of SaaS products and tools that we support companies with. So that's what I've been doing the last 3 years, ballpark of my life. So 3 years as a founder and about 11 years as an early stage investor. And before then, I was in consulting.
Hey everyone, my name is Joe Kinvi. I'm a founder now. I've built technology for investment collectives / syndicates, so groups that invest together. I started building that company because we started a collective that didn't have technology and we couldn't use anything else that was out there. The other main reason why I started this company is because there's just not enough funding that goes to Africa. And for a very long time, we've waited for the West to fund the continent. And I think it's time that we can leverage the diaspora, many of you in this room, to invest back home. I am a fintech guy. I love technology. I love Africa. I love community. And I'm bringing them all together.
Okay. I'd like to say I'm a fintech guy. I'm just a money guy. And so, I'm going to be asking a number of sort of open-ended questions. I seriously encourage you to please raise your hands to either sort of support the conversation or just perhaps even seek clarity. I am left-sided, so I would always be talking to Kristin for most of the questions where I'm going to be asking today. And for my sins, I've spent most of my life as a banker on the dark side, but now I sort of moved over to the bright side in capital markets. And there was one thing which, as a banker, you had to do. It was almost like sacrosanct, prioritizing clients and essentially knowing where to spend time, because then if you spend time with the wrong people, you don't get paid. So I'm going to ask you this question now. When you've been building and investing, what are the things that you thinking back now that you wish you prioritized less?
Yeah, actually, it would be exactly that, right? Prioritize. So, I, I guess I'm more of a nerd, and so I was really in love with the product, and so I was spending a lot of time on the product tweaking, and I don't necessarily enjoy the human interaction piece as much. So I definitely probably should have prioritized the product a little bit less and focused more on the customers and spending time with the customers, because I definitely, especially in those early days, was all about the surveys and as many sort of like low touch ways to interact with the clients as possible. And then I would like spend all of my energy sort of building and tweaking with the product instead of spending all the time really dissecting and having sort of in-depth interviews and focus groups. So I think that's something I would do differently this time, is actually get over myself and spend time with people so that I could get a bit of a knack of how they were experiencing the products.
Joel, I'm going to skip you for 1 second. I'm going to destroy it into the audience. If you don't raise your hand, I know some of the names in the room. Vite, I'm going to ask you. I know you've raised money, you built a business. Just reflecting on this question. Can you tell us one thing? I mean, just leaning into what Kristin just said. What have you prioritized less? What would you prioritize less?
I think I would have.
Oh, sorry. Don't take it that everyone else in the room knows you like I do. So.
Well, I'm with you today. I run a venture capital firm. I invest in probable stories, African fantastic farm. I would have thought about it. We talk a lot about conviction and how you feel about something. But when you're pitching or when you're in the field, what you tend to do is look around and see what the successful people doing what it is you want to do, and you copy. You know, I do a lot. There are a lot of things you steal a lot of things from successful people that have done before you. And when you do that, it's not to say that there's anything particularly wrong in doing that, but you lose your core essence and what makes you special. So a number of the things I've done, I wouldn't have done, right? I would have gone after a certain sort of investor, I've gone with a certain pitch which I thought they wouldn't have liked. I thought at the time they didn't like, right? I thought it was too contrarian to what was out there. It took a while to understand that business is simply between two people, between my customer and the person I'm going to come. And yes, there are 1 billion people there, but there are only about 5 or 10 people that's going to fund you. So if that's the case, why am I changing to fit everybody? When it's just, stay close, true to my core essence, and look for those 5 or 10 that will fund. Much harder, I must say. But looking back, I don't necessarily think so. I think we get carried away with the crowd and the noise, whereas it's just a very, very small group of people that's going to change. Well, change the game for you.
Thank you, Peter. I don't mind copying, right? I think it's not a bad thing to copy. Joe, do you think differently from what he said, or you had something to add?
I mean, if you're not constraining, you're not really building anything new. Like when you look at maybe the latest technology we've seen was OpenAI, who dropped GPT into the world, and everybody started copying. Google has been building AI for a very long time, but I don't think they were bold enough to really put it out there. And I would hate to be building like what everybody else is building. Because of my background, when I go to talking to investors, they automatically assume that I'm building fintech, and they get super excited. And then I tell them, no, I'm building for Africa, and they're like, oh. I actually think that the opportunity is there. Like when you travel the continent, I was in Sierra Leone 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, I'm gonna make so much money here. I think Africa is the place that everybody should be building. And I am willing to bet, I've literally bet my career on this. And I'm willing to bet, and if I lose, I'm actually not losing, I'll probably just go get another job. But when I win, I'm gonna win big. And I think we need to start like betting big. Fintech will be built. Like people will build. There's so many things out there. Like when you speak to investors now, they want you to build something with AI because everybody's doing it. Like what is the next thing that nobody's paying attention to? That's what gets me excited. And like what are the countries across the continent that people don't pay attention to? Like they're still going to Nigeria, South Africa. I went to Sierra Leone and I'm just like, guys, it's a small economy. At the end of the day, investors want to make money. I think what we're building will help them do that. I would hate to be building what everybody else is building. I want to build something that, or I want to set a trend that people will follow instead of just being a follower. So I completely agree with BT, who's actually one of my investors. So.
I was going to say, Borderless is much more portfolio. Sort of
You are going to have to pay if you're advertising. Okay. But of course, I think I'm a big fan of what Borderless is building. For those of you who don't know, you would have some time to tell you after this panel. I thought I saw Emmanuel from Medica. Is he still here? He's on a call. Okay, I was going to ask him this question, but Kristin, a lot's going to fall on you. Thinking about it now, sort of, there is this fascination about sort of raising capital. I mean, there's a lot now, a lot of tech that could help you build quicker, faster, achieve product market fit. So you have no warm intros, nothing at all. How would you start to think about funding or building your startup?
Yeah, so, and I think for us, this is especially relevant because on the Spurt side, we didn't actually think of outside capital as the first. We really wanted to prove the concept, iterate with customers. So there were a few angel checks that came in because, you know, of my network, but we haven't actually even done a proper raise yet. And I think that especially now that's even more feasible, right? Because there's so many quick experiments that you can run with a lot of these tools that are now in the market. You can, if you have design skills, you can upload your Figma into a tool like bolt.new and basically come up with an initial prototype of your product that you can put in front of customers. Before, you needed to be able to hire a designer or maybe design yourself and then hire a full stack engineer or somebody, or you yourself would have to figure out how to build it so that you could get that to market. So I think that there are a lot more shortcuts that people can take to at least getting a first version, getting a first prototype to market. I think that it's also much, much quicker and easier. Everybody has a platform now with social media and microblogging and all of those things, right? You can use your nice camera and put out a video there, put yourself out on LinkedIn. These algorithms are increasingly getting disposed to new content and engaging content and stuff like that. So not that capital is less relevant, but I think that a little can go a lot farther now, certainly, than it did 3 years ago when I started, 5 years ago when Joe started, and 10 years ago when many founders also started. So I think that for anyone kind of sitting in the room who's kind of been thinking about should I not, absolutely you should. And there are lots of tools to kind of get you on the road. And I don't really think you should preoccupy yourself with the investor so quickly. I think that the investor can get distracting very quickly, and you should prioritize the customer, the user, and really sort of leverage all the technology that's available now to kind of get you to a prototype quickly, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wish we got our product out a lot quicker. We are on the V2 of what we're building, and I think it took us like 3 months to get a V1 out. I wish it took a month. And then just testing and getting feedback. I wish we compressed all that it took about a year. It should be 3 months. And when I look back, I wish, like these things, we had more velocity in terms of talking to the user, coming back, fixing it, then going back again. So that's one of the things. Talking about AI, you can build faster, but most of my staff is on the continent. I couldn't have gotten this far without having to hire slightly more affordable talent, but that are equally good, like at a world stage. And I actually encourage people to look at the continent. Now, the challenge is it's going to take you a while to find the right talent. But when you land on the right talent, you're paying maybe a third of London prices for really exceptional engineers. And without that, like I would have run out of money a very long time ago. So I encourage more people to look at the continent for great talent because hey, the African curriculum is actually inspired by the West. So if we all have the same curriculum, why won't we be at the same level? And I feel like people kind of forget that. And yeah, I think we've got great talent there. Many of them have moved to the UK because they can get global talent visa. That's for exceptional talent. And many people that I meet, especially Nigerian, Kenyan, South Africans, they're getting that visa, and the UK government is giving it to them, so they're obviously exceptional. And I encourage more and more people, especially founders, to look at the continent for great talent.
So I second that. Every time I travel the continent, I'm not sure enough, I was in Lusaka 2 days ago. And the quality of the talent in the room, and I say to you, look, your solutions and your talent are not just local. They have global uses, so you need to expose yourself as much as possible to one, because I think one of my running beliefs is that you must identify your talent. And I don't believe in following your passion or anything. Find your talent, hone it, and make sure somebody pays you for it as much as possible. So your talent is not just local. So every solution you create here can be used internationally. And that is a nice segue to the next question I was going to ask about, what experiences people have had in terms of startups. So in terms of what they think could have been a successful startup, what do they think differently? I mean, in terms of their own perspective around the startup success. For one, I would say, my own listeners, don't ever put your money where your mouth is again when it comes to startup investing. Follow the people that know what they're doing and back them, essentially. I'm going to ask the audience, does anyone have a view around what they thought was a startup success that they've very quickly pivoted from? I can see someone at the back of the room that I know has been investing quite a while. I'm going to point to you to please share your perspective, if you don't mind. Don't look away, please. June, I know you're the one I'm talking to. Hi.
I mean, maybe this is more general than a specific company, but...
Do you want me to introduce you to the room?
I'm coming up soon, but
Okay.
I'm an investor. I think it's very easy to get, it's all glamorized in the news. You hear the funding rounds have been announced, but I think what we mustn't forget is that ultimately, are they actually acquiring customers? Are they building a product that is really needed? There are some people that are great at fundraising, and I think it's important to flag that. It's about storytelling. They can get that money, but is it being put into the right business ideas? I think it's something that I've sort of changed my mind on. Just don't get it, too enamored by the stories. Look for the gritty workers that will build something consequential.
Anyone else in the room? Or would you like me to, or to ask you to introduce yourself? Anyone willing to share? Huh? Oh, Kristin wants me to name names. Gentlemen, you look at me. Did you have a perspective on the topic? Yes. Oh, I'm a comedian by night, so look, I feel free. So.
I'm a spectator, so I don't have a very important perspective on it. My background is health. I'm an executive of finance. So when it comes to looking at this from a founding perspective, it's very interesting to hear from founders in this space who are really
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Yodas. Okay, we're looking for non-spectators, and I know there are non-spectators in the room. Excuse me, you're wearing this really beautiful dress, and I know you're an investor as well. Would you please? Yes.
So I'm mostly a founder. I'm a software engineer by trade. We founded AI and IoT enabled tech, asset tech, and waste tech company innovating in Kenya and Iran. So I'm way too. So what's your question?
So the question is, what's one belief you've had about startup success that turned out to be completely false? Right? I said, mine was about, not putting my money where my mouth is, right? Essentially backing people who essentially know what they're doing. And
So somebody mentioned in the previous session, often people that shouldn't get the funding get the funding simply because they tell a good story. They may not even have a background. So the mistake we made as a tech company in Africa was waiting too long to vote for investments. So I think that's the one thing I would say. If you have a good idea, good story, strong leadership and a strong team, put
All it does, I mean, it provides another perspective. I said it does, but I would not underemphasize the importance of storytelling, which is, I think it makes a world of difference. If you can tell your stories better, the reason why, and I shamefully say this, Americans know how to talk a big game a lot. They know how to talk. I suspect maybe it's
Somebody mentioned again the 50%. Kind of, as a black founder, a woman of a certain age, the numbers are down, but still continue to keep telling your story, just come to these events, keep talking to people. That's the goal. Especially for a woman as a black woman, it's an opportunity.
I agree. Anyone else?
Can I?
Yes. Joe.
One of the things that you hear when you're pitching is the whole idea of focus. They're like, focus on one thing. And unfortunately, it's really not relevant for African founders because you're literally one regulation change away from your entire business crumbling overnight if you happen to do business in Nigeria. Most of the founders that I know have multiple products because one somehow is supporting the other, and they've had to build the rails because the rails don't exist. And you start building one thing. Let me give you an example. When we started building Borderless, it was, hey, we want to build technology for angels and collectives that invest in early stage startups. And you quickly realize that actually Africans don't really care about startups. They want to invest in everything else but startups. So what are the other asset classes out there? You have real estate, you have debt. I was speaking to David. Where's David? There's a company that we were talking about, I think a couple of months ago, that is a company in South Africa. They're raising equity, but also they're raising debt. And Africans love debt because equity startup is just so risky. And when you think about the diaspora wealth, it's relatively new and nobody wants to lose their money. So as a result, even running a collective, one thing we saw when we started we've been doing one for 5 years where people put like 1K, 5K. When we started doing real estate, I've never seen so many 5K, 10Ks drop so quickly. That's because, real estate is something that's just that's where most people make money in Africa. My grandfather did it, my mom did it. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So we started building one thing, but you have to pivot really quickly or add another thing because the focus that the West expect isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, I think I wanted to offer a slightly different perspective on that. I kind of hear what you were saying and I agree with it, but I do think it's a kind of focus, right? And I think it's a focus on what the market is telling you and what the customer is telling you. And I do think that laser focus is really important. So to Abby's question about what did I think about startup success, I think for me, actually, it was that the startup matters. It actually doesn't, at least in my experience. So if I look at my portfolio of 40 plus companies, wherever I was very excited about the product or the company, they've either not done well or kind of been mid. But wherever I was just like, I like this founder and I'm gonna take a flyer, they've surprised me. The very first house I bought was literally a deal that I just took a flyer on, and I was like, oh. And then 6 years later, they call me and they're like, oh, I have a check for you, right? And that's like the experience across my portfolio and similar. So I think it's really about the founding team's ability to focus on the feedback that they're getting, to focus on the customer. So don't get distracted by how cool your product is, right? Because you could have said, oh, but this thing is so good at managing angel investors. It's so seamless, right? And then you would have kept pushing and pushing and trying to find those angel investors and those startups, and it wouldn't have worked. But you were paying attention to what the market was telling you, and it was telling you that people want to be able to seamlessly invest in a different asset class. So you pivoted, right? And I think that that's the thing that you need to be focusing on, right? And I think focus is really important. So even for us, when on the fund side, when we're talking to founders, it's a really hard, it's a struggle, by the way, our pitch calls, because the founders keep wanting to tell us about their company, and we're like, we don't want to hear about it. We want to hear about the problem. We want to hear about this thing that you've discovered that is bothering people, and we keep pushing them to help us understand how much of a grasp they have on what the market is telling them and what the customer is telling them. Because I think that if you do follow that line, right, it's true that it does look, from an outsider's perspective, especially for people that are not familiar with the content, it's like, these guys are all over the place. What are they doing? But I think when you pay attention and you look, hindsight is 2020. Then you see that they might have probably been following a thread. So I was with We Capital for a while, and I remember when we invested in TMAPT, which is now MoneyPoint, there's a lot of confusion, right? It wasn't sexy like Paystack or Flutterwave. People were just like, what's this thing that these guys are doing? Are they agency? Like, what's their business, right? But today, whether you're in Kaduna, or you're in Kano, or you're in London, you know MoneyPoint, right? And back then, it didn't look like that, right? And so sometimes I think it's just that focus and that ability to kind of just like say, you know what, I'm relentlessly pursuing that customer that's going to give me money, and I'm going to find them where they are, and I'm going to listen to what they're saying. I think that really makes a difference.
I'm going to throw this back to the audience because I hear what you're saying and I hear you very well because you have network access. There are founders in here that, of course, they're thinking about the problem, but at the same time, they want to craft a solution that would attract capital, right? So because then that's a big thing. You're building, you know there's a big problem, but you pivot because you think that, you know what, or your experience or your first conversations actually it's not helping you access capital. Is anyone in the room here building something and has struggled with capital raising recently? Yes. Please.
Wait, Tim, was that you? Did you say you struggled with capital?
Yes. And I think there's someone else at the back. Do you want to share what your challenges were? Okay. It's present continuous, please.
So my name is Tim Bowe. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Abi Ajayi. We're building a digital addressing system for Africa and every emerging market. I think we have been building this business for 10 years, and we are now growing like crazy. We're onboarding hundreds of thousands users a month, growing 50% month on month in the last 4 months. Our revenue's starting to pick up, but there's still a big question mark and a doubt around, we've been doing this for 10 years, so is it really happening now? And wanting to just sit and wait to just get a bit more data and a bit more time.
Is this investors?
Investors, yeah. See a few more proof points. So that's the challenge.
So question back to you is, so when you're building and you're thinking about the end goal in mind, because oftentimes when I speak to founders as well as investors, that every time you write a check to a founder or to a company, you must let them know that, look, I'm giving you my money on Monday, I want it back on Friday. So are you building with an exit plan which is clear to both yourself as well as the founder, as well as your investors? Because then for investors, mostly they want to translate what is a great business into a great investment.
Say yes and no. To an investor, I'd say yes. The reality is it's a new category of business. We're inventing something that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and there aren't tangible. We can say there's some exit paths, and there are in a few different areas, but we're inventing something completely new, and therefore we're having to also persuade even the exit paths that exist there. We know even on the continent, exit paths, we're still proving, all of us are still proving together. So I'd love to turn it back to you, to be like, what do you feel makes a credible exit path?
Before he answers that question, I know Timbo, we spoke quite a bit last year, and Timbo's literally creating this market. And when you create a market in Africa, somehow nobody really cares because they haven't seen anything like it. And if you're African, you really understand the addressing problem, i.e. you're going somewhere and they're like, when you turn left, see auntie shop and then turn right and then, do a turnaround. It broke my heart that we couldn't, so we brought OK High to our collective and we couldn't raise money because, again, people are like, who are your competitors? and there wasn't such a thing. And like, I'm sure if Timbo was building this in America, like he would have raised millions. But because it's Africa, first we're risk averse and we haven't really seen it before, it's just difficult. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the problem is not going away. And somehow we're just comfortable with the problem. And like, yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Kristin, before I respond, please go ahead. And I'm going to. Yeah.
No, we did this deal, right? So we invested, and I'm surprised to hear this. So I definitely, all I want to say is I'm going to find you after to hear, because I mean, on our side, we still have a lot of conviction. It's why we did the deal in the first place, and I'd like to know how we can help you to get in front of the right investors, because I mean, when I was in uni, we were testing OpenAI models, and that was like over 10 years ago. So it's not like OpenAI came out of nowhere. Sometimes these things take time, and I think we understand that. So I'd just love to follow up on that. That was really my only thought. I'm surprised to hear you're struggling, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing which I would say, I think it's a collective responsibility of everyone in this room to help to drive capital formation in your local market. I think, and I'll say this, me included, that myself included, that if we don't push for local capital formation so that local capital back startups, we must be ready to fail again, fail better, in the words of Simon Beckett: ever tried, ever failed, fail again, fail better. Because it's in that process that, of course, we innovate, we copy, and we do better. But the conviction around where to back money needs to start from the local markets, because then that combination of local and global investors is what will help us drive exits. And I think once you start to see people backing that, then we start to see other options around using capital markets to drive exits. I think the fascination we get into unicorn status, I think, will go away. You can build a business which is $40-50 million and get a great exit in the local market. You can get it acquired into a bigger entity. But it's a long conversation. But I want to encourage everyone here that when you start building, when you start raising capital, you must be very clear about the end in mind. So build proper, have the right governance structure in place. Start to ensure you have the right cost controls that keep you disciplined as you go forward. I'm sorry, you wanted to make a contribution, please.
I think what I'm sensing, I just got a large Boston University spin-off engineering environment where we talked about the fact that the reason Oxford and Cambridge actually can't really rival MIT and Stanford and Harvard is the fact that there is no enough cultural shift within the environments, number one. Number two, both universities are taking around 20% equity for the spin-offs versus 3 to 5% in the US. So no institutional investor really wants to come in with 20% because of universities, so they've got to rework their model. But the big issue is that cultural aspect of it, I think, which is something we've got to work in Africa with the locals by creating the ecosystem. The Americans are way ahead with billions of dollars and billions in endowments. And some of these universities will literally be sitting on these endowments and be reaping billions every year when it comes down to the operations of it. I think Africa, anyone that works in Africa or has invested in Africa, we all know there's a huge potential there. But that ecosystem that needs to be built by the Africans for Africa and then exported to the rest of the world is the kind of the shift that needs to happen. So I think culturally we've got to put that agenda ahead of everyone in the room, but also beyond. It's not an overnight thing. No VC or investment ecosystem has been built anywhere in the world, including the US. You look at the Spurt 30, 40 years ago, it's not what it is today. So having the 2050 vision is, I think, what Africa needs right now in order to build that ecosystem, and that serves the rest of the world. I think the huge benefit is happening with the Middle East. I think the Middle East is doing a really good job in bringing the know-how to the rest of the world, to the money and the capital, and they've done a better job than some of the Asian countries. I think there's a lot we can learn in in what's happening, especially in the last decade. But that's my perspective.
Yeah, and okay. To your point, I was actually something that is, I think it always comes up is like, is VC right for Africa? VC is not right for Africa. And I'm always like, whenever I see those things, I often think there's nothing wrong with the asset class, right? The asset class is designed to work a particular way. I think to your point of cultural shift, we need to figure out what are the right things to back that fit within that asset class. And I think we're not having those specific conversations. We keep talking about the model doesn't work, the model that doesn't work, but it's like saying there's something wrong with a round hole because you're trying to fit a square in it. And the question is, where are the round things, right? Because that's what I think we need to find and back.
And the asset class, when you look at venture, you want to grow 20% per annum compound, and I think after 10 years, you are 3.5x your money. Africans, we don't have 10 years. One. The second thing is when you're collecting 30-40% on your debt in Nigeria, why are you waiting 10 years to collect your 3.5? You double, triple your money every year, every 2-3 years. And that coupled with inflation, very high interest rates, it's very difficult for the continent to really plan for 2050. So again, just to complement your point, it's like the environment doesn't allow to plan for 2050.
China had the same issue 20, 30 years ago, and that's changed relatively quickly. And you've got the volume and the scale with the smaller ticket sizes. Not everyone can double, get 30-40% or 2x within a year or two, by being able to raise debt, equity. What about the millions of people that aren't actually in a position to?
I agree with you. I think that we have to be intentional about this, and we need to decide, are we looking to build for today or looking to build for the future? So that 2050 thinking is actually quite important, which again brings it back to us. We need to drive for local capital formation. We need to put our money to build for the future and find creative ways. I was saying earlier to Kristin and Joe that if you're a company in Kenya where all you're building in shillings, selling in shillings, why are you raising dollars? Raise shillings first hand. And once you become a gorilla in your local market, then you can export monkeys into new markets, and perhaps maybe you need dollars at that time. But you're producing in Kenyan shillings, or you're producing in naira, raise in naira to give you that comfort first in the first instance. That's my view. I know the gentleman at the back wanted to say something. And please, if my views are contrarian, do feel free. This is a workshop. Raise your hand and challenge me, of course. I mean, we're here to cross-fertilize ideas and before we wrap up.
No, I'm not contradicting you.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, no, please. Feel free, please.
My name is Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Co-founder of Lama, and built tools to help people make more informed choices. Now, I also co-lead a community. I mean, Joe talked about global talent. So I also co-lead a community of 600 plus global talent recipients of Nigerian descent here in the UK. Now, in terms of the question you asked earlier, as someone who's fundraised for my venture, I think two buckets of problems I see. The first would be investors will say something on panels like this, but do something different in reality. I think that's the biggest bucket. We back exceptional founders, and then really when it comes down to the crunch, they're looking for signals like, oh, we'll back you if we've got external validation from XYZ, or we really love you, but come back when you got this check from this other person. So I think there's that. I understand sometimes why that happens, but I think that inconsistency in signaling or in messaging also makes it kind of confusing for some of the founders I work with. I think the second one, which again, this might not be the actual fora, it's something I've kind of experienced as someone who's only moved to the UK 4+ years ago, is people who have moved here and are now building in this market. My product is primarily for this market. And building for this market, finding backers who look like you, who also believe in you, can be a bit of a challenge. So I think those two buckets of problems, I mean, to your earlier question.
Thank you. I've been told I need to wrap up, but we'll take the last bit and I'll come chat to you. If it's quick, we'll take it quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned exit.
Yes.
Like that's I'm founder, and that's one question which I really don't want to ask. Because I'm interested in building business model exit. So I think this is one thing which we really always recognize there is challenge for us. When at the very early stage, someone comes from outside and asks, what is your exit plan? It's for the investors to figure out whether they see this business good enough to be able to exit in good time. It's not biased.
Well, I would tell you, one thing as a founder, one of the things you want to see is you want to actually achieve alignment with your investor early, because the only religion which capital has is return on and return off. So help them answer that question, working together. You don't have to have the answer, but you need to be responsive in helping them solve what is a key question. We'll come and chat. I've been told I need to wrap up, but I'll come and chat to you. Yes, we'll talk about exits, and we do need to talk about exits. I think I've got a final question. If you had a chance to send a voice note to your 10-year, to your younger self 10 years ago, what would you say?
Joe, go.
No.
Joe, go first.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Your younger self 10 years ago, what would you say?
Should I be perfectly honest?
Yes, please.
Don't lose your cold wallet key. Honestly, I lost a lot of Bitcoin because back then it was cold wallets and I lost my key. So if I'm being honest, that's what I would do.
Joe.
For me, it's congrats. You're finally a founder, and you've broken away from the black tax curse.
I think we're being too honest.
Thank you very much, everyone. Look, I'm happy to continue this conversation afterwards. Have a very good afternoon. Cheers.